never thought my life at 72 would become this strange. I was just an ordinary widow, left alone with a quiet house and more time than I knew what to do with. After Tom passed, the days felt endless. People said I'd adjust to the loneliness, but years went by and the silence still pressed in. And that's when he came into my life. Charlie, my dog, my comfort, my companion, and, as things would unfold, something more. It started like any pet owner relationship. Charlie was a sweet mutt I adopted from the shelter after my daughter Sarah practically begged me to get a dog. "It'll keep you company, Mum," she said, not knowing the company I'd end up keeping. At first, Charlie was just a dog, albeit a particularly attentive one. He seemed to know when I was feeling down, nudging my hand with his cold nose, wagging his tail to lift my spirits. I talked to him often, and I suppose that was normal enough. After all, who wouldn't talk to a dog when you've got no one else around? But things between us slowly evolved into something deeper, something I couldn't have imagined. I still remember that night clearly, the night I first felt something shift. I had been sitting on the couch, lost in thought about Tom. It was the anniversary of his death, and I was tired of crying. Charlie, as usual, was by my side, but this time, he wasn't just sitting there. He had crawled onto the couch and placed his head on my lap, his eyes locked onto mine, as if he could feel the weight of my grief, as if he understood. "You're a good boy, Charlie," I whispered, absent-mindedly stroking his soft ears. I could feel my heartache lessening just from his presence. I remember thinking, he understands me better than anyone else. The way he looked at me, it wasn't like the usual way a dog looks at its owner. There was something deeper, something almost human in those eyes. As the months passed, Charlie became more than just a companion. I'd wake up every morning to find him curled up on the edge of the bed, the space where Tom used to sleep, now filled by my dog. I didn't mind it, of course. In fact, it became something I looked forward to. That warm body next to mine, breathing softly in the night, made me feel less alone. But it wasn't just his warmth that made me feel different. It was the way he started following me everywhere, like a shadow, but more than that. He started watching me with an intensity that unsettled me at first. Whenever I moved, his eyes were on me, always waiting, always expectant. It wasn't long before I began to feel a strange connection growing between us. Something I couldn't quite explain. There was one evening, though, that stands out more than the others. It was late, and the house was quiet. I had finished my tea and was heading to bed when Charlie trotted into the bedroom behind me, as he often did. But this time, instead of settling at the foot of the bed, he sat next to me on the mattress. His large dark eyes bore into mine. I felt a strange flutter in my chest. "Charlie, what are you doing?" I asked, laughing softly to break the tension I suddenly felt. But he didn't move. He just sat there, staring, and something about the way he looked at me, his eyes filled with a certain longing, made me freeze. I felt my heart race, but I couldn't tear my gaze away. I knew it was ridiculous, but there was a moment, a brief moment, when I could have sworn I saw something in him, something beyond what was normal for a dog. As if sensing the confusion in my head, Charlie nudged closer to me, resting his head on my thigh. His tail wagged softly, but the moment was charged with something I didn't understand. I reached down to pet him, my fingers trembling slightly, and that's when I felt it. A warmth, a connection, something I hadn't felt in years, not since Tom. From that night on, things only got stranger. Charlie became even more attached, always finding ways to be near me. I couldn't move without him being there, watching, waiting. He started sitting closer during our nights on the couch, his body pressed up against mine in a way that felt more intimate than it should. It was comforting, yes, but there was something else there too, something unsettling that I couldn't admit to myself at first. I remember waking up one night, the moonlight casting shadows in the room. I turned over in bed, and there he was, Charlie, lying right next to me, his face so close I could feel his breath. I should have been startled, but I wasn't. Instead, a wave of warmth washed over me. I reached out, my hand brushing his fur, and he responded by nuzzling closer. It was in that moment, half asleep and vulnerable, that I felt it. The undeniable realization that my bond with him had crossed into something deeper, something I couldn't easily explain. I tried to shake the thought from my head, telling myself it was just loneliness playing tricks on me. After all, I was an old woman who had lost the love of her life. Was it so wrong to seek comfort even if it was from a dog? But the feelings only grew stronger. Charlie seemed to sense it too. He would follow me everywhere, always by my side, and those eyes of his, they never left me. It felt as though we were two beings drawn together by some unseen force, something beyond the normal bounds of companionship. It was strange, but I couldn't deny it anymore. I needed him, more than I cared to admit. And then came the night that changed everything. I had been restless, unable to sleep. My thoughts were a whirlwind, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was building between us. I wandered downstairs, hoping a glass of water would calm my nerves, but when I returned to the bedroom, Charlie was already there, lying on my side of the bed. He didn't move when I approached, didn't even blink. He just stared at me, waiting, like he had been expecting me. I climbed into bed, hesitantly at first, but once I was under the covers, Charlie moved closer, his body pressing up against mine in a way that felt so intimate. My breath caught in my throat, but I didn't push him away. Instead, I let him stay there, his warmth seeping into me, filling the cold spaces in my heart that had been empty for so long. I should have been ashamed, but I wasn't. In that moment, lying there with Charlie beside me, I felt a strange sense of peace, a peace I hadn't felt since Tom died. It was wrong, I knew that, but it also felt right in a way that I couldn't explain. We stayed like that for a long time, just lying there in the dark, two lonely souls finding comfort in each other. The days that followed were a blur of confusion and guilt. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had crossed a line, that what was happening between Charlie and me was more than just companionship. But at the same time, I couldn't stop myself. I needed him. He had filled a void that I hadn't realized was so deep. But as the weeks went on, I began to realize that this strange, emotional affair with my dog wasn't healthy. I had let my loneliness spiral out of control, and now I was tangled in something I couldn't fully understand. I knew it had to stop. I had to face the truth. I was seeking something from Charlie that I should have been seeking from people. From my family, from my friends. It wasn't easy to admit, but the truth was staring me in the face. I had to let go of this unhealthy attachment before it consumed me completely. Charlie was a dog, a wonderful, loyal companion, but he wasn't the answer to my loneliness. He couldn't fill the space that Tom had left behind. So, slowly, I started to pull back. I began spending more time with Sarah and the grandkids, reconnecting with old friends, and finding ways to fill my life with the things I had once enjoyed. Charlie was still there, of course, always by my side, but I made sure to set boundaries. I had to remind myself that he was just a dog, my dog, but not my partner. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to let loneliness drive you to strange, unexpected places. I had let my grief cloud my judgment, and in doing so, I had formed an attachment that wasn't healthy. But in the end, I found my way back. I learned to lean on the people who loved me, and most importantly, I learned that no matter how much I loved Charlie, he could never replace the connections I needed with others. And so, here I am now, sitting in my quiet home with Charlie lying at my feet, just as he always does. I wish I could say that everything returned to normal after I made that decision, to pull back, to set boundaries with Charlie. But the truth is, it was a slow and difficult process. There were moments when I second-guessed myself, when the quiet evenings felt too overwhelming, and I would find myself leaning on Charlie's familiar presence. Old habits die hard, as they say, but every day I reminded myself that this wasn't healthy, that it wasn't fair to me or to Charlie. He was a dog, a creature who gave unconditional love, but he wasn't a replacement for the human connection I desperately needed. I found myself seeking out more interactions with people. My daughter Sarah was the first to notice the change. "Mum, you've been coming over more often lately," she remarked one afternoon when I had stopped by for tea. Her voice had a warmth that I hadn't heard in a long time, and I realized that my pulling away from people had made them feel the distance too. I don't want to be alone as much," I admitted, not quite ready to tell her the full extent of my strange relationship with Charlie. How could I? Even I was embarrassed by it, and Sarah had always been practical, the type of person who would never understand how deep my loneliness had gone. "Well, we're always here for you, Mom. You know that," she said, smiling. Her words offered comfort, but there was also a pang of regret in my chest. Why hadn't I turned to her sooner? Why had I let my grief and isolation push me into such a strange emotional attachment with a dog instead of my own family? As time passed, I made more of an effort to reconnect with the world outside my small home. I joined a book club at the local library, something I hadn't done in years. At first, it was difficult to sit there and chat with the other women. all of them talking about their children and grandchildren, their busy lives filled with people. I felt out of place, as though my years of solitude had made me forget how to connect with others. But gradually, I found myself enjoying their company. We would discuss novels over cups of tea, laughing about plot twists and characters that reminded us of people we knew. It felt good to laugh again, to feel that lightness in my chest that had been missing for so long. Through it all, Charlie remained my steadfast companion, but I was more aware of the boundaries I had to maintain. I no longer let him sleep in the bed with me, a habit I had come to rely on during my darkest days. Instead, I would give him a soft pat on the head before bedtime, and he would settle into his own cozy bed by my feet. It was hard at first, to resist the urge to pull him close and let that warmth comfort me like it had before, but I knew I had to stand firm. As the months went by, I started to notice a change in myself. I was no longer as consumed by the overwhelming loneliness that had driven me to seek solace in Charlie. My heart still ached for Tom, and I suspected it always would, but I was beginning to accept that grief and loneliness were part of life. They didn't define me, though. I had people who cared for me, people I could turn to. And I had Charlie, but I now understood that his love, while unconditional, was different from what I needed. It was one crisp autumn day, about a year after that strange turning point with Charlie, that I finally felt like I had come full circle. I was out for a walk in the park, Charlie trotting happily beside me, the leaves crunching under our feet. The air was cool, and the smell of pine trees filled the breeze. As I looked around, I saw other people walking their dogs, some laughing and chatting with friends. It struck me then how simple it could be, to just enjoy the moment, the companionship of others, human and animal alike. Charlie stopped to sniff at a fallen leaf, his tail wagging with contentment, and I smiled down at him. "You've been a good dog, haven't you?" I said softly, scratching his ears. And he looked up at me, those big brown eyes filled with the same love and loyalty he had always shown. But now I saw it for what it was, pure, simple and unconditional, but not something to fill the emptiness that human relationships were meant to fill. In the months that followed, I found myself opening up more. I let my family in, told them about the struggles I had faced, the loneliness that had consumed me after Tom's passing. I even told Sarah, in a roundabout way, how much I had come to rely on Charlie. She listened quietly, her face filled with understanding, and when I was finished, she hugged me tightly. "You don't have to go through this alone, Mum," she said, her voice soft. "We're always here." And for the first time in a long while, I believed her. I didn't have to go through it alone. I had people who loved me, who wanted to help me through my grief. And though Charlie had been a vital part of that journey, I now understood that he couldn't be my everything. He was my dog, my loyal companion, but I had to learn to lean on the people in my life again. Looking back, I realize how easy it is to let loneliness take you to strange places, to create attachments that don't make sense to anyone else. But in the end, it's the human connections, the love and support of family and friends, that truly make the difference. Charlie will always be a special part of my life, but now I'm learning to embrace the world outside of my quiet home once more. And as I sit here now, Charlie curled up at my feet, I feel at peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from escaping loneliness through strange attachments, but the kind that comes from facing your feelings head on and reconnecting with the people who matter most. After all, in the end, it's the love we share with others that truly heals us, not the fleeting comfort of solitude or the affection of a dog, no matter how loyal.